Everyone else that's on is muted, correct? Thank you. You don't have anyone?
Morning, yes, I'm just.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
He's told us the screen.
All right, we'll start with an opening statement. Due to the federal and state emergency declarations and guidance for social distancing under the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting of the Montevideo School Board is being conducted in accordance with the Minnesota statutes that apply to meetings by telephone and other electronic means. Persons may monitor this meeting from a remote location by going to the district YouTube channel, which can be accessed at the district website. Individuals wishing to leave comments may do so in the email attached, address the board at montevideoschools.org. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and accessible will be made available on the district's website as soon as reasonably possible. Take a quick roll call. Hansel? Here. Helgeson?
Here.
Pauling?
Here.
Zachariason? Here. Snell?
Here.
Stinson here. Administrators. Look for approval of the agenda. We do have one addition to the agenda. We've got Kevin Tabeast addressing the board on the topic of the Montevideo Scholarship Program in 1.4.
Make motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Kelly.
I'll second.
Tyler. Got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. I'll take a roll call vote. Beer Hansel?
Aye.
Helgeson?
Aye.
Pauling?
Aye.
Zachariason? Aye. Snell?
Aye.
Stenson, aye. Motion carries. 1.4 is address the board. And tonight we've got Kevin Tabeast with to share on the Montevideo Scholarship Program.
Yes.
Kevin, floor is yours.
Thank you. As you mentioned, I'm Kevin Tabeast. I'm a 1981 graduate of the Montevideo Senior High School. Just give you a little background about the scholarship program and why I so strongly believe in it. The Montevideo Scholarship Program, it's been in existence for approximately 60 years. It started out very small and it's grown into something that I believe is very special, and it benefits many graduates from Montevideo High School. The purpose of the scholarship program has always been to help the graduates of Montevideo High School further their education with a scholarship loan. Through the use of a promissory note, the student is able to have their scholarship loan forgiven. The guidelines have changed over the years, but the general purpose has always remained the same. Initially, a student had to graduate from a 4-year program. Later, it was to complete a 2-year program, and now it is to complete 1 year of college after school, but you must attend school in the first year following your graduation from Montevideo High School. Over time, the program has grown very, very significantly. It has been done by personal contacts, emails, letters, text messages, phone calls. And the community believes in, and I believe they trust the scholarship concept, and they also trust the leadership of the committee that's been developed. One of the keys to preserving the integrity of the scholarship program has been the completely anonymous group outside of the committee itself that helps with the selection process. It is vital that no one knows who serves on this committee. That levels the playing field for all graduates and allows the group to make fair decisions without any fear of any community repercussions. All students that graduated from Montevideo High School that attend a minimum of 3 credits each semester of their senior year are eligible to apply. Many scholarships have additional requirements or additional parts to the application. But the key to that process is that the student must apply. It's not just a given. You have to apply in order to be considered for a scholarship. I feel fortunate and also honored to say that I was a recipient of a scholarship from Montevideo, that my children have also been helped through the generosity of this same program, and that hopefully in some small way that I'm a part of continuing that legacy. It's a program that I strongly believe in.
Thank you, Kevin. I understand we have a discussion item later on the topic. I think I understand that you're able to spend some time with us if we have further questions.
If the board wishes for me to stay, I would certainly be available for questions, yes.
Yeah, if you've got the time to hang with us for a little bit, we've got discussion items coming up here in not too long a time, so we would appreciate that, Kevin.
I'd be more than willing to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to 1.5, approval of the consent agenda. These items were sent out in your board packet, and if you've got any specific questions, we could pull anything out for specific discussion, or I'll entertain a motion to.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as is.
Thank you, Becky. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a roll call vote. Beer Hansel? Aye. Helgeson?
Aye.
Pauling?
Aye.
Zachariason? Aye. Snell?
Aye.
Stenson is an aye. Motion carries. 1.6, we've got resolution accepting gifts, donations, contributions, and bequests. This month, we've got a donation from the Montevideo United Way for $870 for Thunder Rock Care and $600 for community ed scholarships. We've also got United Methodist Church donated $1,010 to Ramsey Elementary for areas of need. And the Leos donated $500 to the community ed scholarship. Thank you to all those groups that have contributed and helped our students. I'll entertain a motion to accept those donations.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution accepting the list of gifts, donations, contributions, and requests.
Tyler?
Second.
Ms. Kelly? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a roll call vote. Beer Hansel?
Aye.
Helgeson?
Aye.
Pauling?
Aye.
Zachariason? Aye. Snell?
Aye.
Stenson's an aye. Motion carries. 1.7 is superintendent's report. Yeah.
Thank you. Within your materials at your spots table, I did provide a copy of this information, but just a couple of things to update you on. First of all, the AASA National Conference on Education is the 18th and 19th of February. This year, rather than being able to go to New Orleans where it was scheduled to be, the conference is virtual. So I did go ahead and register and I will be attending it, but I'll be attending it from my office on those days rather than enjoying the warmth down in New Orleans at that time. So, but they typically have a very robust agenda, and I'm looking forward to being able to participate in that. So thank you. Legislative update, just a number of things to mention here. The budget targets for the two houses have not yet been released. The House, right now, from the last I've heard from our lobbyists, their heightened focus is really on dealing with racial inequities. And one of the key items for the Senate is the return of students to in-person learning. The governor is looking at trying to address declining enrollment with the pandemic. As we've moved into this year, we, along with most schools, have seen a decline in enrollment. And a part of this is because we've got a number of people, when they went to distance learning, went either to a firm that provides online educational opportunities, or they went to homeschooling. And with both of those options, then they are no longer enrolled in our school district. And so that, of course, eliminates the formula funding for those students. We are both hoping and anticipating that when the pandemic calms back down and we get more and more in-person learning, we'll be pulling a lot of those back in and we'll be able to recover from that. But if not, then dealing with declining enrollment up at the state level will become a major issue for all school districts. The education budget for the governor, he's talking about a 1% formula aid in the first year of the biennium and a 2.5% formula aid in the second year of the biennium. That remains to be seen how that goes through the two houses and so forth. But and then he's also focusing on American Indian funding and tightening up the services that the American Indian revenue is used for. And we have about 20 to 25 students that are of American Indian descent within ours. So we are receiving some of that American Indian funding. And next month, we'll be hearing a little bit more in the reports relative to the American Indian program, as well as the Achievement and Integration program, which ties closely to that. MSBA's virtual day at the Capitol, rather than making a trip in there, the Friday chats at 9 o'clock on Friday mornings on the 4 Fridays in March will be focusing on what's taking place in the legislature and on providing information for the board members that we would have received had we made the trip into the Capitol for that. And then the MASA Day at the Capitol is March 23rd. That also is virtual, and that is for the southwest part of the state. MASA, which is the superintendent's organization, breaks that out into regions, and then rather than everybody in the state inundating the legislature, we try to get it so it focuses and we can get even some of the legislative leaders to speak with each of the areas of the state. So that'll be on March 23rd for our part of the state.
On the chats, is that something that we can do independently or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you may do that independently, and you can go onto the website and register for those as well. But they do have those every Friday morning at 9 o'clock.
Good, thank you.
Board work session for February. Last summer, when you told me to pencil in a work session, I did that, and then you stole my work session date. So I had put in the 22nd originally. I understand you have another meeting that day, which is fine. We just need to identify another day for a work session in February. And that will be where we really get into some of the real details relative to the budget development and some of the potential budget cuts that we'll be recommending. So if you could take a look at your calendars for February. And I'm looking for sometime either in the latter part, well, in either of the next 2 weeks would work. The 15th is President's Day, and that's a little more difficult to get everybody pulled together. And I'm not sure which dates you've got meetings scheduled on.
16th, 18th, and 19th. We have
Okay.
meetings.
Yeah, 18th in the evening, 19th in the morning. Yeah, that week, the 17th is really the only evening that's
Okay,
viable.
the evening of the 17th, what about the week following?
And evening on the 17th is also Ash Wednesday.
That is Ash Wednesday, right?
The last one. We originally had.
Yeah, we moved some already, so.
I think the following week, as a board, we only have Monday evening.
Yeah.
I think. Although there's something on the 23rd, but I think it's just you and I
It's
don't
just,
know.
it's just me and that's not all day.
Yeah, on the 24th. Wow.
24th is an 8
8
a.m.
a.m.
meeting.
Yeah. That's.
But yeah, I mean, the 24th, 25th, 26th in the evenings they're open on my calendar.
Yeah, mine too.
The 25th would be good for me, Andrew.
Thanks, Joe.
That works for me.
That works.
Thursday, yeah.
Check in my house. Yep.
Okay,
Not a magical question, what time?
okay, that is a Thursday, so I'm usually tied up with a call from the commissioner until about 4:30, 4:45.
You guys want to do something before 6 or do you want to start at 6 like we more customarily do? You go first. Joe, do you have a time preference on the 25th?
Nope.
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock?
Seems like that works.
Okay. So during that meeting, we will go over some of the preliminary budget reviews. We'll also start preparing for some potential budget reductions. We'll be looking at the impact of declining enrollment. It is important to keep in mind that while some of the issues bringing about the need for reductions are tied to the pandemic, not all of them are. We've been talking for a number of years that we're going to need to start reining back in some of the expenditures. And we've gotten to that point. We've made it for about 10 years, really with no really major reductions. So that's been a pretty good run, and now it's time to just make some adjustments. And what we're really looking at is about a 4% budget reduction. And that would bring us back into line with where we want to be with our fund balance. To put that into perspective just a little bit, that's not as significant as the reductions we were going through 11 years ago when we were cutting 10% of not only our general fund budget, but we reduced 10% of our staff. So, also, as we talk about the budget and the budget reductions, we have gotten word that the legislature is talking about funding shifts and that we can probably expect a funding shift. And so the way a funding shift works is typically we receive a certain amount of our financial aid from the state each month. And then we get typically about 90% of that as we go through, and then we get a 10% catch up the next October. The reason for the catch up like that and to hold off a little is so you can even everything out. if, for example, a district overstated their enrollment figures, well, then you have to adjust that, and that's where they may not get 10% then. And when it comes to that catch-up payment in October, if they received too much as they went along. By the same token, if your enrollment took a leap over that time, you could end up getting more than 10% at that time based upon how that was. The funding shift, if you start to increase that, then it starts to potentially impact your capacity to cash flow as you work through. We have a little bit of an advantage in that we are the fiscal host also for MERVED, and so all of that money also flows through us, and that assists a little bit in just the cash flow itself. But the thing you really have to be careful about is when they do the funding shift, the money that you should have gotten becomes a receivable. And so it already shows up on your books and in all of your reports. The only place it doesn't show up is down in the bank. And so you've got to make sure you don't spend that money because it's not there. And sometimes that can become a very significant dollar amount. When we went through the funding shift 11 years ago, we had about $2.5 to $2.8 million on the books that wasn't in the bank. So you can imagine what would have happened had we spent that money as we were going along. So that's what you have to really watch for as you go through that. Consequently, it's necessary to do some trimming and make sure that you keep things in the range where you can operate. We don't have any idea if there is a funding shift, what the amounts will be. That remains to be seen what comes out of the legislative session. So it will be an interesting spring as we go through and we watch the legislature. Unfortunately, we can't wait on making all of the decisions until the legislature's finished with their work, because we also have some deadlines we have to make as far as how we deal with personnel issues. Ben, I did think I would just run through a little bit on the quarantine guidelines in light of the CDC recommendations that came out back in December. The CDC back in December indicated that you could start thinking about a 7 to 10 day quarantine period. And within their recommendation on that, they were looking at the quarantining taking place, but then also as you came back, you would maintain your social distancing. The Department of Health and Department of Education are recommending the following considerations. First, if a school can't maintain 6 feet of social distancing guidelines when they're in in-person learning, they should maintain the 14-day quarantine period. And we can't bring all of the kids back into the building and maintain the 6 feet of social distancing all the way through there. If athletic and activity participation is a consideration, 14 days is a necessity, because on days 8 through 14, even on the shorter quarantines, you're to maintain social distancing. And you're not going to have the social distancing in practices and in competitions. Our regional support team did recommend that we stick with 14 days. And our goal really is that as we get people back into in-person learning, we want to keep them there. we're hoping that later this week, we'll be making the announcement that we will be bringing back grades 10 through 12. Our goal, once we get K through 12 all in person, is to try to keep them there for the remainder of the year. We know that it's not very effective if they're jumping back and forth between learning models. And we know the most effective learning model is when they're in person receiving instruction from the teacher. So that's really our goal, and that's why we're looking at trying to maintain it by sticking with that 14-day guideline. With staff, and our primary consideration comes in with potential of travel among staff. When they're coming back from traveling, for example, outside of the country, then we can go to the 7 to 10 day quarantine period with testing, because under all of our learning models, staff is expected to maintain the social distancing guidelines. And it's a lot easier for staff to maintain the guidelines than it is for students to maintain the guidelines within the classroom setting. It's been recommended by our insurance carrier that if we're looking at out-of-state travel or out-of-state participation, that's not recommended. And if we decide we're going to do that anyway, our carrier does want to know in advance.
What would apply there?
So if, for example, we were to take the 8th grade on the trip to Washington, D.C. this summer, then we need to let our insurance carrier know, and also then upon their return, which that does occur in the summer, so that's helps a little bit with the overall impact on the school itself, but then we need to make sure that we are following all of the guidelines and what the state does identify as guidelines at that time. And our insurance carrier would assist us with identifying what steps we should take on that. So.
Okay.
But again, our real goal on this is to try to make sure that we're taking the steps that get our kids back into school and where we can keep them in school. I think that the things that I hear the most from people are best place for kids is in school. And once you get them there, don't be jumping back and forth. Well, some of that requires that then everybody else needs to do the things that enables that. So, and that's all I've got on my report.
Any questions? All right. We'll move on to 1.8, which is committee reports. First is continuing ed. Joe, do you have any updates?
Joe wasn't able to make that meeting.
No.
I, however, did.
All right.
So primarily we talked about the getting everyone up with their licensure, and I think everyone is on track. They went through the people who still needed to get some things in there. There's been a couple of changes on the licensure, and we're getting those addressed as well. So it was a short meeting. It lasted about 15 minutes, I think, but those whose licenses are up for renewal this year or on track for renewal.
Sounds good, thank you. Staff development, Travis and Becky.
I was at that meeting. They talked about the PLC teams are working to make some of their classes more relevant to careers. The assessments for schools are moving forward. However, that might change. They had said with the Commissioner of Education changing. And Merved had their development day on January 18th.
Good, thank you.
It's not here.
Okay, so no high school update.
No.
This- So 1.8.2 is the administrator updates. First up is Mr. Sprung.
Good evening. Just a few things quickly. Excuse me. We started our 4th week of in-person learning this week. It's good to have everyone back in school. It takes a little bit of time to shift to a new mode. It takes almost a week for people to get into new routines. We're there now, and it feels like things are going well, like a school year should feel. We are still following all the COVID protocols we had put in place at the beginning of the year. We continue to have 32 distance learners by choice. Other than that, everyone's back in school full time. Our reading course started this last week. We have a part-time virtual tutor who's based out of Wisconsin. She sees 9 first graders for 20-minute sessions every day. And right now they're working on phonemic awareness activities and fluency activities. And then just kind of an update in terms of where kids are achieving. We did our winter screening right about quarter break. And in the area of math, about 74% of our students scored at or above standard. And that's pretty close to what we would score in a typical year. In reading, however, only 60 to 65% of our kids scored at or above standard. And that's about 5 percentage points below a typical year. So it appears to us right now that the inconsistent schooling from last March till now has had its greatest impact in the area of reading. We will use this information from screening to qualify kids for title, for classroom teachers to do some more targeted instruction. And then I would encourage parents that the best way to help your kids with reading is to read every night with them. And that's all I have this month.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions for Bill? No, thank you very much. Mr. Gray?
Well, let me start with ditto to everything Mr. Sprung said. We found the same things with math and reading. We're behind in reading as compared to math. Doing the same, we're really the only change in our COVID protocols, we have all kids there instead of half our kids at a time. But speaking of kids, just so give you a little update here, we're currently at 119 in-person kindergarten students, 9 distance learning students, and 1 new student that's going to start March 1st for a total of 129 kindergartners. That's the largest class we've had in the 10 years we've been kindergarten at Sanford. So enrollment is not shrinking by any means. In fact, it's grown in the last couple of years. Looking to next year, we're planning on somewhere in the neighborhood between 115 and 120 kindergartners again next year. So those numbers are going to stay fairly consistent for at least a couple of years. A couple other things, community ed, we did start after Christmas now some activities for elementary age kids, starting slow, doing some small groups of 10 or less with some basketball things. They're doing some wrestling, and then we'll be adding to that as the spring goes, and then hopefully into the summer, get back to a full-scale summer rec program, which would be very, very good for the kids, the community, and obviously for community ed in our budget. So that's kind of in the works right now, is how we can start to do some of those things as time moves forward here in the next few months. And then finally, athletics, we did start January 4th with all of our athletic programs, grades 7 through 12, boys, girls basketball, wrestling, swimming, and dance. Things have gone fairly smoothly at this point. As far as COVID is concerned, we've had no interruptions, and knock on wood, we're hoping that continues. We are allowing 150 fans, spectators at any event other than boys swimming. Most sites, in fact, only Morris on our schedule is allowing any fans at all because of just physical size of the facility and meeting all the requirements that we have to follow in order to have spectators. Thursday, the board of directors of the high school league did decide to move forward with section and state tournaments. So at the end of March, kind of middle of March to the end of March, there will be section and state tournaments going on. A lot of that is still unknown as to what that's going to look like, but it will be in place sometime in the next couple of weeks. So our kids will have the opportunity to get pretty much a full season, barring any COVID interruptions or outside interference. But it sounds like there is a good chance of those things are going to happen. So that's all I've got. If there's any questions.
Well, the section and state tournament, I believe that's later than normal. How is that going to affect spring sports?
There'll be a little overlap at the end of March into the first week of April. I think the last state tournament is scheduled in like April 8th or 9th. Kids that are in those state tournaments will have, two sports going on at the same time, but we do that earlier in the fall with swimming, and girls basketball and dance is real normal for an overlap. So it's not new. Generally, we don't get outside in the spring until the first week of April is usually about the best it is, and really don't probably get to play any events outside until probably the 10th or 12th. So I don't foresee it affecting much, maybe a day or two, but otherwise I think we'll be able to make the spring be fairly normal. Right now, the plan is to have a full spring. And what they've done is back the state tournament and section tournament events about a week to 10 days further into June. So baseball usually ends around the 10th. Right now it's scheduled to end around the 16th or 17th. So trying to get the full season in, since those kids did lose an entire season last year.
So they are scheduled to start as they normally would start, and they'll just be overlap.
I think they're starting a week later than normal. Kind of shifted the whole season backwards 1 week. But literally, the plan right now is to have a full 20-game baseball, softball season, a full 14-meet track season, a full 18 tennis matches. So they're planning a full season. Again, that could change tomorrow, but that's the plan right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bob? All right, thanks, Mr. Gray. Appreciate it. We'll go to discussion items 2.0. The first item is 2.1, update on administrative discussions on staffing programs and budgets.
Okay, we have been going through the initial discussions on the budget. I've had the principals take a look at some things they can begin making potential reductions on. They've been having some conversations with some staff members. We're not yet at the point where we're ready to bring all of these to the public, but we want to have our staff being kept on board as we go through this process, and so there aren't any surprises for them on down the road. We are trying to get at least a 4% reduction in each of the buildings, and we're fairly close to that right now with some of the things that are going to be being proposed. We'll be going into those in a lot more detail when we have that meeting later on this month. Also, as we go through this, we continue to monitor the activities of the state and federal legislature. Also, as things get tightened up a little bit, then we will try to make some educated assumptions on what's going to happen with funding and so forth. But we want to be able to make the cuts that are necessary. We also want to try to be as accurate as possible as we go through the process. So. Okay.
Any questions on that? More to go. 2.2 is 2021-2022 school calendar and the future of the flexible learning year. Why?
So a couple of years back, we went through the second round for the approval of being a part of the flexible learning year. When this first started 6 years ago, we put in an application to start a week early the first year with the option of going 2 weeks early in the years following that. Once we went through the first year, it went very smoothly. We really were accomplishing the things we wanted to. We didn't really see a reason to move to a 2 week earlier start because we thought that we were getting an accomplishment on what it was we wanted to do. So since that time, we've stayed with the starting a week prior to Labor Day. As we move forward, you'll need to decide whether or not you want to continue with the pre-Labor Day start. If to start prior to Labor Day, we will have to submit an application along with the rest of the MERVED schools in December. And prior to submitting that, if we're going to start before Labor Day, we have to hold 3 public meetings. And in the past, we held those in the fall, and we picked out, I think, 3 consecutive weeks and held them before some school activities. You don't typically get a large turnout. We generally ended up with 1 or 2 people across all of the meetings. But if the decision is not to start prior to Labor Day, we're still a part of the Flexible Learning Year program with MERVED. All the Flexible Learning Year does is it just staggers when the schools start. We'll still maintain the common days with MERVED. Additionally, you have some schools that'll start 2 weeks early, some that'll start 1 week early, some that'll start right after, and that allows us to better utilize the MERVED staff with the opening school year workshops. So you're still becoming a part of the program itself and able to take advantage of the professional development opportunities that we are able to provide our staff through this. And I think right now, every school district is contributing $5 a pupil unit into a fund, and we use that for bringing in some high quality speakers and such to speak to our group a couple of times a year. So but what the decision does need to be made coming down here in the next month or so as to whether there's a desire to continue with the pre-Labor Day start or go back to starting after Labor Day. Again, that has been fairly successful on that as well.
Any questions from the board? Tyler, I hear you're newer to the board since we've been doing this, but any questions? So we did, right?
We'll put on action next week.
Action next time. Then?
Okay.
Okay.
Next week.
I guess I would be curious, I'm not opposed to this, but how do you measure that it's been successful? Just out of curiosity,
Well, okay, so we've been able to have the opportunities for the additional professional growth, and that's been a real key. We've been able to better utilize the staff at the Merved. One of the biggest things that I've used in measuring from what I've seen as public perception, as if it's been successful, has been the number of calls that I've gotten relative to it. And I've received no negative calls.
That's a good step.
And people will call when they're not happy about things.
Yeah, they get the people I've interacted with. I haven't had any negative either, but there's a polarization, if you will, between people with younger students and people with older kids. People with older kids, your kids are playing sports since the middle of August anyway, so it's less impactful. You're back and doing whatever. And so that's the only thing I've noticed is that there is a kind of a difference between people with kids that's under 6th grade and kids.
One of the most positive comments that I've gotten from a lot of people is they like the 2 4-day weeks to start the school year.
Yep. Little run.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. 2.3, Monteville Scholarship Program. I think this was an item last month while I was out, and I think you guys tabled it to get some more facts. Kevin earlier in the meeting shared in the address the board section, I guess this is our opportunity to ask more questions of each other, and if we've got anything for Kevin, we should do that too, to make use of his time.
Do you guys have any questions? You were the ones that weren't really here last time.
Well, I mean, for me, it's just, it sounded like the summary was we tabled it. So I guess what were the...
Well, we had asked about getting kind of who was on the scholarship committee, if it was just school staff or if there was community members and...
We can't know that.
We don't have to know who it is. We were just wondering if there was, is it just teachers? Is it just administration? Is it, that was the question.
It is not administration. I have never been to a meeting of the committee.
What does that help us know?
Yeah, that would be my questions.
Well, just who's making the decisions, if it's under the schools, kind of say what happens with that.
Yeah, I
Who's
think,
making the decisions for the school?
yeah, it wasn't until recently, right? And recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, it was completely disconnected other than it had our name on it.
Right. The school had maintained a complete hands-off policy on it, and actually, the school had contacted or had assigned it to Darwin Tavis to build and to run, and he did a fabulous job of building and running it. And I think that and as has been spoken to, the anonymity of it, particularly in a smaller community, is important because you avoid the pressures that come on.
I think if the community knew who was on it, we would very quickly not have anyone willing to serve on it because it would become very uncomfortable for them. I would be in favor, and I'm not sure how we would go about this, but I would be in favor in getting it back into the community's hands and out from under the school's oversight at all.
Right.
Kevin, do you have any insight on how we could go about doing that, or if there is enough community support in order to do that?
I know it's been looked at several times, and forming a nonprofit and all of that just didn't seem feasible at that point. That doesn't mean it can't be revisited, but I know it's been looked at least twice, and it's always gone back to the way it's always been. As one attorney that looked at everything, or 2 or 3 years ago said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, that was basically, he said, you have a good program put together, you have good guidelines in place, and he didn't see any reason to change it at that point.
I'm confused. When did the change happen then? Because you said it's only been on a school, or went to school 3 or 4 years. I'm confused where the changes at. Or...
Well, okay, so within the past several years, all of the funds that run through the student activity accounts got pulled under board direction. That's the primary change that occurred there as far as it being under board control.
So before it was maybe always flowing through the school, but the board didn't have control of those funds. But I think it was an accounting principle change that drove that need to have the board control.
So that would potentially warrant a revisit of the nonprofit idea and getting even the funds out of the school. Possibly.
Sure.
But even if the funds ran through the school, we as a board can delegate decision-making to the committee.
Absolutely.
And that's what I would be in favor of, I think, when we come to a point of further discussion or voting on action. I just think it's been run so well for so many years. I'll echo, I think something that's not broken.
Sure.
I did speak with somebody last week, and I didn't even bring it up, and they actually pulled their scholarship from the school one. They're still offering a scholarship, but they said because kids were not able to get it through, like 2 years ago, they said they had a student that went into, I think it was like Air Force or something like that. And then they were going to go to school the following year, so they couldn't get it. So then they still gave the student the scholarship outside of the school one. And now this last year, they pulled it again because of PSEO.
Sure.
And went on their own because the school won't allow kids to have more than, or they won't allow them to have those classes for PSEO for a full day to get a scholarship. And I don't think, in my thoughts, I don't think that doing a PSEO should take away from your scholarship opportunities. All students, it's their right through the state of Minnesota to.
Kevin, can you speak to how they came up with the 3 credit requirements on the committee initially?
And those things took place before I was actually a part of the group. And obviously, you know that my dad was very involved with that. I know there was a time period 1 year where there were kids that applied for scholarships that were very deserving of scholarships that did not receive scholarships. And that bothered him quite a bit. He actually sought out individuals in the community to make sure that never happened again. And so I know that there are some dollars available to make sure that every child that applies for a scholarship receives a scholarship, following the guidelines that are in place.
They went with 3 credits because I spoke to Darwin before the last meeting, and he had said they went with 3 credits because that was about half a grade.
Kevin or Dr. Heller, are the kids that go PASCO, are they eligible? They're still eligible for certain scholarships, correct? Even if they don't meet the 3 credits, can they not apply for certain scholarships within the committee? They might not be guaranteed it, but they can still apply. Is that an accurate statement?
No, they cannot apply if they don't take more than 3 credits. So when you go in and ask about PSEO at our school, the first thing they say to you is you can't apply for scholarships then if you take full-time PSEO. So if you don't have 3 credits, you cannot apply for scholarships.
That matches what your understanding is, Kevin?
That's my understanding, yes.
Did you get your answer, Joe?
Yes, thank you.
I had briefly spoke with Kevin, and Kevin, feel free to correct me on any of this. But just talking about moving it out of board control, school control whatsoever, the biggest concern is that anyone who's donating to the scholarship fund would lose the ability to kind of dictate where those funds are going like they do currently have right now. What was the number, Kevin, on a ballpark on how many scholarships the committee actually selects?
I would say it's about a third of the scholarships at the most that are actually selected by the anonymous committee. The rest are self-directed by the people that donate those dollars. They have the opportunity to make that selection or have criteria in place to help them make that selection.
And when the nonprofit idea was approached in the past, that's been part of the issue, correct?
That was my understanding as to where those dollars are held. I know they did talk to at least one foundation and were unable to make those very specific designations if the money was held with that foundation.
And was the promissory notes portion of that is another kind of gray area that we aren't really sure would be able to continue moving forward?
I don't think that that's an issue. I think that's been looked at not only by colleges, but also by a couple of attorneys, and they see that that is well worded and in place very well.
Okay.
That's important. You wouldn't want to lose that.
So leave it the way it is. Try to find some completely disconnected way. That's the two. Is there a third option? Because I think if I gather what is being questioned is, should any category of students be prohibited, right? In this case, it's PSEO, but someday it could be some other category too, right?
Could be the circumstance of someone not going to college immediately.
Yeah, it could be the military route, right? So, is it just as simple as, this may be a question for you, Kevin, is it something as simple as on the form, the students check PSEO or not, and that anything that the scholarship committee is awarding themselves, they can do whatever they want to with it, and then the folks that are self-directing, which I think you said was 2/3, did I catch that right?
Approximately.
So 2/3 of it is, it's self-directed anyway. So is that an option that would meet whatever guidelines you found?
I think that would be fair, because then people are choosing if they are okay with it. Because like I said at the last meeting, a lot of people didn't know. I just spoke to businesses and donors, and they had no idea that kids were being excluded on these scholarships. And some of them are donating, quite a bit of money.
So Kevin, you want to take that to the committee and see what they think? Did you hear my question, I guess?
I guess we could certainly bring that to the committee, for discussion. I think, to the other point, those that are donating, most of those people that are donating are choosing who they're giving their scholarships to. And so I'm not sure, that they're not aware, that the PSOE or whoever aren't eligible. They're already selecting the students that they're giving those scholarships to.
Yeah, so it's only the people that are just giving an undesignated amount.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with what he says, because those people are getting scholarship forms that those kids are choosing to apply for that scholarship. So if they aren't even allowed to apply for that scholarship, how does that business know that they're in it? Let's say it's a nursing one, and you have the student who's a PSEO student going to school for nursing. That, let's say the hospital has a scholarship that they've got. Well, if that nursing student can't apply, how does the hospital know that they're out there to give that scholarship to?
So they can't apply, or just
They can't apply.
Waste your time.
No, they can't apply. For our school, you can't apply.
So there's a disconnect there that
Yes.
seems to me. It needs to be.
Yeah, so like Andrew said, if there could just be how many credits are you taking currently at the high school? Or how many, or something along those lines, and the kids can mark it off, and if that person says, okay, they're not full-time at our school, I choose to not give it to them, that's their choice. But I don't think the child should be excluded from it.
You want to give that some thought, Kevin, and let us know?
The group can certainly discuss that, yes. I'm not sure what direction you're looking for from us. You know, if we make that exception, then what's the next exception? You know, because there are other students that have a Montevideo diploma that maybe don't take those 3 classes at Montevideo High School. And I'm not sure how that would affect the ALC or any other students, you know, within our group. Maybe somebody there can address that for me.
Any student attending the ALC, regardless of what school they come from, can choose to graduate from Montevideo High School. So if you're attending an ALC, the high school in the community where the ALC is located is a choice you can make for where you will graduate. You also have the option of you can go back and graduate in your local high school.
So so theoretically ALC students that choose money could be applying for the scholarship already?
Not unless they're taking classes at Montevideo High School.
Right now, the way it's worded, it eliminates a area, a student that came from a different high school, different school district from applying for one of our scholarships.
And it would prohibit a student that is a resident student, but that is not attending school here because they would be attending, because the ALC is a school district, even though it's owned by Montevideo and YME and Dawson and Black Pearl. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like they wanted to discuss, so yeah, let's keep working on it. That's my takeaway at this point, I guess.
Thank you, Kevin, for your insight. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, move on to action items, section 3.0. First is 3.1, which is an accounting policies and procedures manual update for February 21.
And Adam can speak to that.
Right.
All right, the procedures manual was included in the agenda items, support materials. There were no significant changes this year to the manual. Each year we need to update it if there's any major changes. Also if personnel changes, but we did not have any personnel changes in our office this year. So manual stays the same. It's a routine item that we need to have in place for parts of the controls in place for the audit.
I'll make a motion to approve the accounting policies and procedure manual.
Thanks, Travis. I'll second. Thanks, Tyler. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Travis?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Tyler? Aye. Kelly?
Hi.
And Andrews and I, motion carries. Second is, agenda item is to approve the 2021-2022 contracts with the Southwest West Central Service Cooperative. Anything specific to point out in this contract?
Okay. Now, this is an annual item and it's fairly routine. We purchase a number of services from the service cooperative. Most of the services we purchase are tied to special education. They're for services that we really it would be cost prohibitive for us to put in all of our own independent programs in all of these areas. In some of these cases, we need a partial teacher or one for only a couple of hours a day, and you're not going to pick up a person for that. However, through a cooperative where it can be an itinerant person, we can make that work. So there is a decrease this year for the coming year of just under $6,000, or just a little less than 2% from the current contracts. It reflects decreases in the services of the teacher of the visually impaired, teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, and physical therapy, as well as a restructuring of the costs of the special education services and program management. So all of those factored into that decrease in there.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract for cooperative for 21-22.
Thanks, Becky.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Tyler. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Travis?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Tyler?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Andrews and I, the motion carries. 3.3 is a grievance action step 3. This is not an action item. This is an opportunity for both groups in the grievance to share information related to the grievance. It's an opportunity for the board to hear that information. There's not an opportunity for cross-examination or calling witnesses or anything like that, and there won't be a decision this evening. We'll follow the requirements of the contract to make that decision. So we'll start out with Mr. McMahon and Mr. Walker.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. My name's Joe McMahon. I'm a field rep with AFSCME Council 65. I do have Mr. Walker on the phone, and I'll just lay some foundation of what this grievance is about, and then we'll invite Mr. Walker on to answer some things that he can answer better than I can. We have what we're at here is a step 3 grievance in the collective bargaining agreement. That's the last step prior to arbitration. The union did have a step 1 and 2 grievance with the school district representatives. The grievance was denied at those level. That's why we're here at the school board level to talk about the grievance at step 3. Like I stated, this is a termination grievance. I did send Dr. Heller and Mr. Stenson some information. I don't know if you have that in front of you, but the history of the employment with Mr. Walker, he started in June of 2020. And in September, I do have some notes from the supervisory file. In September, there was a discussion about his performance with his supervisor. Again, in November of 2020, there was a discussion about performance issues. In November 16th of 2020, there was a discussion with the supervisor. And according to the notes that were supplied, it looks like a verbal warning was issued at that time. December 4th, Mr. Walker was called into a meeting with his supervisor and the principal, Mr. Sprung, and he was terminated from his employment. The union filed a grievance on December 5th, stating that the district didn't have just cause under the contract language in Article 10 to terminate Mr. Walker, and the remedy in the grievance was that Mr. Walker be made whole. One part that was added to that grievance is in Minnesota, if you work for a public employer, you are entitled upon termination to a Loudermill hearing. The December 4th termination letter didn't outline Mr. Walker's Loudermill rights. So ultimately, within a couple of days, the December 4th termination was rescinded by Mr. Stark. There was a meeting held on December 8th to talk about the termination. Again, a chance for Mr. Walker to answer some questions from Mr. Sprung and Mr. Stark. And the next action that took place was on December 14th. There was a new notice of termination or separation issued to Mr. Walker. It outlines some of the same, in the paragraphs, it outlines some of the same information from the December 4th termination. A grievance was, step one grievance was filed on December 15th, and there was a meeting held to discuss the merits of the grievance with the district representatives. That was denied. I did include in the packet, if you have the packet, the contract language. AFSCME Council 65 represents the maintenance and custodial group for the district. In the collective bargaining agreement in Article 10, it talks about employees covered by the contract may be disciplined for just cause by the Board of Education upon recommendation of the maintenance director or the superintendent. Like most collective bargaining agreements, the agreement with the district and AFSCME Council 65 outlines some progressive discipline steps. Starts out with an oral warning, written warning, suspension with or without pay, and then termination. That's what's on those pages that I sent for the board to review. The district went from an oral reprimand in November, which we'll ask Mr. Walker about that in a minute, to a termination of employment just a couple of weeks after an oral reprimand was issued. One of the things that arbitrators look at is what steps did the employer take prior to the serious action of termination of employment. That's why there's steps that are listed in the contract. There are instances where steps can be skipped. I've seen that in the last 22 years I've been doing this kind of work. If you steal from the employer, you're probably going to get fired without progressive discipline. If you assault somebody, you're probably going to get fired without progressive discipline. More often than not, 99% of the time for performance type issues, some levels of progressive discipline happen prior to taking the step of eliminating the person from their job. Jim, why don't you turn your mic on? It's a lot easier to do this in person. Board members, we'll work our way through this, doing this virtually. So, Jim, what was the position that you were hired at the district for? Custodian? Jim, can you hear me or no?
We're not hearing Jim either.
On the meeting.
I see him on there. I don't know if he was.
He needs to unmute his mic.
Yeah. You're mute, Jim, you're muted now. Now try
you're
talking.
unmuted.
Yeah, we're not able to hear him. Jim, can you hear us?
He wants to get muted himself.
Yeah, maybe it looked like he logged off. Maybe he'll log right back on. Well, for the sake of time, and I guess I'll just go through some of the information that I was going to have Mr. Walker just explain to the board himself. And if somebody sees him get back on, just let me know. So Mr. Walker was hired in June of 2020. We talked about that a little bit. Part of the meeting with Dr. Heller in the step 2, we explained to Dr. Heller that Mr. Walker wasn't given any kind of formal orientation plan when he was hired. He wasn't given any kind of a checklist to follow throughout his shift. There were some duties that were added after he was hired to the custodian position. Part of it had to do with COVID, which there was some extra sanitizing and washing that had to be done. He worked for several months before he had a clear understanding of what his assignment actually was. He did sit down with the lead custodian at the school, and they had a diagram of the school, and they wrote down initials next to who was covering what part of the school, who was cleaning what bathrooms. There were some discussions early on between the lead custodian and Mr. Walker, but really, and I wish Jim could tell you himself, if we get him on, he can. What he stated to Dr. Heller and I in the step 2 meeting was, for a good part of 3 months, the last 3 months that he was employed, he didn't have any communication with his lead worker, who worked day shift, and Mr. Walker worked second shift. When the discussions were happening with Mr. Stark, the supervisor, and Mr. Walker, one of the things I asked Mr. Walker in the meeting with Dr. Heller was, before you were terminated, did the lead custodian or your supervisor spend any time with you, come in and help you during your shifts, show you maybe some quicker ways to do things or better ways to do things? And Mr. Walker replied that nobody ever worked side by side with him to train him in on his job. There is some, according to Mr. Walker, there is some discrepancy in what the school district reported as what his assignment is. He believes, based on the conversation with the lead worker, that his assignment was actually more than what was listed in some of the documentation that was provided to the union as gathering information for this grievance. There was a couple of pictures that were provided, and I don't know if the school board members had a chance to see those, but one is dated November 23rd, and it's actually a picture of a bathroom. Obviously, the toilet bowl is dirty. It does have, in this picture, in the first picture on November 23rd, blue chemical in the toilet bowl. In the December 3rd picture, there's no blue chemical in it. The bathroom doesn't look any cleaner. Mr. Walker's response to that was nobody ever informed him. He would need verification that this was one of the bathrooms he was assigned to. He did tell Dr. Heller that he cleaned his bathrooms daily, as he was requested to do. But in the event that this was one of the bathrooms that he was assigned to, I don't know how it works at the school district, but where I work, we jump in and we help each other out when needed. So nobody in this 1 week period ever told him that, hey, I noticed your bathroom didn't look like it got cleaned. Make sure you get that one today. Or in the case that we do at Ask Me Council 65, we jump in and help each other. If somebody's running behind, we'd certainly pick that up. Somebody else could have wiped that down. So I don't know, what these documents came in late in the game. They didn't come in until after the termination was issued. They weren't part of any discussions prior to the termination letter that was issued. But the point I'm trying to make in this is somebody was hired on, and the district went from oral reprimand a couple of weeks later to a termination without any other steps being followed, without any other mitigation efforts that took place to make the role that Mr. Walker was hired for successful with the school district. Jim, were you able to get back on? Okay, I don't hear Mr. Walker on the line at all. I don't know.
Yes, line it is. Mike does show that it is open.
Okay, Jim, we can see that you're not muted, but we're not hearing you. Do you have a volume control, or do you have something that needs to be turned up on your? I don't know if you're logging in on a laptop or a phone. Well, would the school board give me just a minute to call him on my phone, and I'll just have him on speakerphone, then you'd be able to hear him?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'll call him right now. Jim, I'm going to call you, and then I'll just put you on speakerphone.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
Yeah,
Oh, hold on, Jim. Jim, turn off your mic on your device. Whatever you're logged into the district on.
I've muted him.
if I hit the microphone volume, it goes off.
Yeah, I want you to turn it off so that we don't get the feedback.
I've muted him.
He needs to turn he needs to turn the volume down on his computer as well.
Okay. Yeah, turn your volume on your computer all the way down, Jim.
Log off.
Yeah, or just log off is fine if you're on the phone.
Oh, okay. Are you still getting the feedback there or not?
No, I'm not getting any feedback.
No, I'm talking to everybody else that.
Seems fine right now.
Okay, all right. Jim, don't do anything different.
Okay.
I think that you were trying to log back in, so you probably didn't hear everything that I just said to the board members. I'm just going to ask you a couple things so that they can hear it in your own words.
Okay.
So the position that you were hired for with the district is custodian at Ramsey School. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What were your hours?
My hours were from noon to 7, I believe.
Okay. When you were hired, what was the orientation plan like, Jim?
The orientation was, the first couple of weeks, there was no school, and it was cleaning, putting the rooms all back together. But then after that, there was no orientation whatsoever. I got a list of things to do, and I thought that you had to do all the rooms.
Okay, sorry about that. Jim, is your volume all the way down on your laptop?
There it is now.
Okay.
It's down now. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's better.
Yeah. So basically, I was doing quite all the rooms and all the teachers' rooms and all of the other bathrooms other than the 2 large bathrooms. The head custodian, when I, told him that, it was taking longer than the 7 hours, he said, well, what am I doing? And when I told him, he said, oh, well, you're not supposed to be doing this. He said, that's my room, and that's this. And he said, oh, my God. He said, I'm sorry that I didn't tell you what to do. And then that's when he made a list and a checklist. He had an outline of the school and he had a checklist and he wrote, we wrote J for all my rooms and all my stuff that I had to clean, and a T for all of the stuff that he had to do.
Okay, do you remember does it say on there what month that was or what date that was?
No, I just wrote down the time, and I did not write the date down when that was, but
okay.
Yeah, no, there was no date.
Okay.
It was like I said, I just have time down that he did it,
Okay.
that we did that.
All right, Jim, was that who was that with? Was that your lead worker?
I read a note that was sent in about the amount of time to clean, and I just want to say that I think on that paperwork it says something about 15 rooms or something, but I was doing 18. I was doing all of the teachers' classrooms. I was doing five of the bathrooms. It says 4, but I was doing 5. I was doing one of his rooms that he was supposed to be doing. I was doing that bathroom. But I was doing all of there's 18 or 20 classrooms that I was doing.
What about COVID? Was there any other duties that were assigned? Was there any other washing or cleaning?
COVID, there was the duties assigned for that, of course, were the masks. I had to collect all the masks, and I had to wash the masks. There was the towels that the teachers were using for the Clorox for wiping tables and stuff down. I had to wash those as well, and then I had to also spray all the door handles on the entranceways as well as all the lockers as well. So that was a lot of the COVID stuff that I had to do, as well as the offices. I also did the nurse's office, the principal's office, the main office. Those were a few, but all together it was 20 rooms basically is what I was responsible for in the 7 hours. And it says 4 bathrooms. I think I wasn't sure how many bathrooms they said on their list, but it was actually 4 bathrooms, and there's actually a 5th bathroom that one of the office workers asked me to clean because it wasn't being done. So I did it. So basically it was 5 bathrooms.
There's a note, Jim, about a meeting with you and your supervisor and the lead custodian on this. Jim, listen for a second, on the November 16th, and it said you were issued a verbal warning. Do you recall that meeting?
Well, we had a meeting before that. I asked Mr. Sprung if we could have a meeting to discuss an incident that took place between Todd and myself, and Todd said to me real quickly, because he was leaving, Todd said to me, Mr. Sprung brought him to the office and told him that he did not like the way that his office was being cleaned. And I said, before I got a chance to say anything to Todd, I went and scheduled a meeting to speak to Mr. Sprung. And in that meeting, I told Mr. Sprung that the reason that I did not clean his office was because I asked the secretary why he was out, and the secretary told me that Mr. Sprung was out due to the COVID. And since the they closed all the classrooms. There was two classrooms that had COVID, that the teachers had COVID, that they closed. I felt that I wasn't going to go into Bill's office to clean it for the week or weeks, however many days he was out. And I felt that it was only fair that he should have at least said that he was going to be over to COVID testing and he was going to be separated from the school at that time. And so that's why his room didn't get clean.
Jim, when we were in the meeting with
I wanted to tell him and bring to his attention that Todd was kind of nitpicking about a lot of stuff that wasn't being done, and I just didn't think it was fair. And Bill told me that basically he couldn't help me with that. That was between me and Todd.
So in the meeting with Dr. Heller and I, at the step 2 grievance, you talked about how much communication you had with your lead worker the last 2 or 3 months of employment. Maybe you could tell the school board about how much you communicated with your lead worker the last couple months.
There was a lot of communications between myself and Todd, and then basically the last, for some reason, after that meeting that I had with Mr. Sprung, Todd cut me off, and basically there was very little to no conversation between him and myself for the last 4 months that I worked there.
And he was your lead worker?
Yes. He was my lead worker, yes.
Before you were terminated?
Yeah, I know that he added on the entranceways for me to have the entranceways done. And I came in one day and Chuck Stark had a note on my little table that I sat at, and the note said that there was a complaint about one of the entranceways not being clean, and I texted Chuck on the telephone. I texted him and I said that he needed to tell me and be a little bit more specific about what entranceway he was talking about, because I was only responsible for 3 of the entranceways. And then after I thought about it, I texted Chuck back again and I said, well, you know what, Chuck? I said, it's no big deal. I said, I'll just do all 5 entranceways, because I was just kind of upset about the whole thing. I said, well, it's just as easy for me to do all 5 as it is to do 3.
The notes that the district supplied, I'm going to refer to the November 16th meeting, the verbal warning meeting. Were you ever told in the verbal warning meeting that, if you fail to meet any guidelines in the next couple of weeks, that you were going to be terminated?
In fact, any of the meetings that we had, I never once, Chuck, and even Todd never once said to me that, hey, we're telling you this because if you don't change, you're going to get terminated from the job. I mean, nothing was ever said. And like I said, and there was no conversation from Todd whatsoever for the last 4 months that I worked there, other than, hello and goodbye. That was basically it.
Prior to your termination, did Mr. Stark or the lead custodian work a shift with you or spend any time with you to really walk you through the ins and outs and maybe how things could?
None whatsoever.
So they didn't? Okay.
I changed my shift. I went in an hour earlier, or an hour. I went in at 1. It was from 12 to 7, and then I went in and changed my time to 1 because he left at 1. And so if I got there at 1, I didn't. I felt as though he was uncomfortable with me coming in there, and the way that I felt about it was that when I got there and I came into the shop, he left. And then when I went out, I got my cleaning cart. When I left the shop, then he went back in. So then I felt, well, he's uncomfortable with me, so then I'll change my shift and I'll go to 1 instead of 12 so he doesn't have to worry about, being uncomfortable anymore.
Okay. When you're saying he, please let the board members know who you're referencing.
Todd,
Okay. The lead custodian.
he's the lead custodian.
Okay. All right. Jim, is there anything?
And getting terminated was a total shock to me. I was caught off guard. I didn't understand it. That day that the warning, the verbal warning was one of the teachers poked her head in the maintenance shop and said that, told them that I didn't clean the room, which was not true because it was a Friday, and Mrs. Jasperson and Mrs. Olson decided to give every kid in the school a bag of popcorn. So of course, the children, they don't care. There was popcorn in every single room. There was popcorn. So I knew that I was going to have to do extra cleaning, which was no problem with me. I had no issue with it at all. But especially this teacher that went in and said that her room didn't get clean. It did get clean because normally her room is just a mess because the kids throw things all over the place. They throw stickers on the floor. They do everything. So there was twice as much stuff on the floor because of the popcorn. So I know for a fact that I at least swept all of that floor and swept it because what I did was those 6 classrooms there was no carpet involved in those 6 classrooms, and I swept every single classroom and then swept it to the doorway and picked it all up at one time so that it would make it go quicker. And then I mopped those floors. I was only supposed to mop those floors once a week. But those 6 classrooms I wound up doing about twice a week.
Okay. The last question I have for you, Jim, is there was a couple of pictures that were sent to us, and they were of a bathroom.
Yeah, the one picture of the toilet that was not me. I specifically cleaned that bathroom all the time, and the date was kind of funny because it said November 23rd, and I didn't get terminated until December 14th or whatever it was, and no one had said anything to me about that bathroom being dirty like it was. I really particularly clean those bathrooms. Well, those 4 bathrooms were always clean. And if anybody asked Mrs. Jasperson, Mrs. Olson, they were thrilled to the death with the way that I cleaned their bathrooms. So I don't. That's the only thing I have to say.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your feedback. So, Jim, when you were off the line, I went through the procedural comments of what the grievance was about. The union's asking.
I heard everything.
Okay, you heard it all. Okay.
Yep, I did hear it all. I don't know what happened with the microphone. It's kind of crazy.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. All right.
So we appreciate the fact or the time to present the step 3 grievance tonight. If the school board members have any questions, we'd certainly try to answer those. If not, that's fine as well, and we'll just wait for the written response.
Ron, do you have any thing you'd like to share? And Joe, can you mute yourself or get some feedback?
Oh, sure.
Mr. Sprung, can you hear us?
He's coming, he's gonna be.
Oh, he's here?
in person.
Yeah, okay. So Mr. Strong's gonna be here in the boardroom.
Dr. Heller asked
Okay, perfect. All right.
There is that way only, or here? Okay. So I'm here to tell Ramsey's side of the story of why we're here.
Yes.
Mr. Walker and I remember things, similar things, but in a different order, and remember different specifics. A couple of things I'd like to point out right away is that if he had not talked to his supervisor in 4 months, he had not talked to Todd since July, which can't have been happened. Excuse me, I've got. So Mr. Walker was hired in June of 2020, and we are in the midst of summer work, so that's nowhere like the regular cleaning. First 2 weeks, his supervisor was on vacation, and we had a substitute custodian from another building we worked with. Beginning in July, he worked with Todd. They finished up the summer cleaning, started to get the rooms ready to go. Things seemed to be going well. And then once August came around and we started to have kids in the room, we started to get complaints from staff about rooms not being cleaned. Mr. Goldson, our lead custodian, thank you so much. Discussed the concerns with Mr. Walker several times without improvement, at which time he got Mr. Stark involved. Mr. Goldson did tell me that these things were going on, but we wanted to follow the normal chain of command. On September 15th, Mr. Stark talked and Mr. Goldson spoke with Mr. Walker about concerns with his work performance and laid out specific expectations for improvement. On November 7th, Mr. Stark and Mr. Goldson again addressed performance concerns, restated performance expectations. I believe this is the time that Mr. Walker's schedule was changed, and it was to allow him to have more time after school, to give him more time inside the rooms. This is also part of the reason that he and Mr. Goldson didn't talk to each other. They were on completely now different shifts. On November 16th, Mr. Stark and Mr. Goldson met with Mr. Walker to address performance concerns, and this resulted in a verbal reprimand, as well as directives given related to job performance. On November 24th, Mr. Walker met with Mr. Stark and me at Mr. Walker's request. At the meeting, we discussed some of the things that weren't going well. He brought up the fact that I had concerns about how my office was being cleaned, and I only have 3 expectations from my office. The garbage is emptied. I have a table that I meet with people at that gets cleaned and it gets vacuumed. He is right that the previous week, I had been out for COVID issues, and I did not expect my room to be clean during that time. However, the Monday I came back, the floor was obviously not vacuumed. I thought, oh, well, he thought I was gone, that's fine. It didn't get vacuumed until Wednesday night, so 3 days in a row. At that point, Mr. Walker said, I cleaned it every night. Well, that's not the case. Unfortunately, that was usually Mr. Walker's response when performance concerns were brought up was, it's getting done. At that meeting, we discussed that we needed to have all of his work completed well each day. Or he said that. Then we talked about my floor, and he said, well, the assigned duties took more time than allotted. So he asked for more time because some of the duties couldn't be done during the time allotted. He did say that there were some extra jobs added to the position. One is that the laundering of the masks on a daily basis and the towels. That sounds like a big job. So the masks are put in a lingerie bag in every classroom. They're hung outside the door. as when the kids are done or when the class is done. So as he would walk through the school, he'd have to pick them up, throw all the masks into the washing machine at the same time. He'd also pick up the towels at that point. Start the load, he could go do his job, come back, change the loads, put the towels in, continue to do your job. I do the laundry in our house, my share of the laundry. I know there's lots of other things I can do while the laundry's happening. He also alleged that Mr. Goulson didn't like him and they didn't get along very well. And I did tell him at that point that he would have to work out his personal concerns with Mr. Goulson, that we were talking about job performance. He did talk about the entrance ways, and he hadn't been doing, he was supposed to do 3, but because they weren't getting done, he was trying to do 5. I told him he only needed to do his 3. And we only expected them cleaned once a day because he did bring up, well, if I do them before the end of school, kids will have recess going on. You only need them cleaned once a day. So at the meeting specifically, he was told that all assigned classrooms, entryways, hallways need to be completed daily with the periodic disinfection of doorknobs and other high-touch surfaces. Disinfecting the doorknobs really involves walking through the school and spraying the doorknob. That's what it involves. We talked about that there was enough time allotted to the position to complete the work, that he was responsible for organizing his time to complete the work. It sounded like when we were having the meeting that he was waiting till after kids left it before he started any of his cleaning. I told him that prior holders of the job started cleaning rooms while teachers were on the prep time. Because we only expected them to be cleaned once a day, and teachers were on the prep time, that's when that cleaning got done. Anyway, so we talked about it. He was responsible to organize his time to make sure that that got done. In early December, a few days, we met on the 20th. In early December, Mr. Stark was provided evidence that a bathroom had not been cleaned 7 days in a row. And Mr. Stark showed me the pictures, and you could see that in one picture, there was blue chemical in the toilet. And the next picture, there wasn't. But the same stain was on the rim of the toilet. Right then, we're in the midst of the peak of COVID, if you remember where we were at. This is a key issue for me, that bathrooms needed to be cleaned. So in discussing with Mr. Stark, we looked at the fact that he was, Mr. Walker was a probationary employee, and things weren't working out. So Mr. Stark wrote and gave him a notice that he was being placed on paid leave and having his employment terminated on December 15th. On December 5th, Mr. Walker grieved the dismissal based on Article 10 of the contract, and specifically noted the lack of a Loudermill hearing, which is not usually afforded to a probationary employee. And basically, a Loudermill hearing is an opportunity for the employer to present the concerns to the employee and have the employee answer to those concerns. Being we didn't call it a Loudermill hearing, we went on and had another one, but basically my meeting on the 24th with him would have met all the requirements of a Loudermill hearing. So his termination was rescinded on December 8th, and he remained on paid leave. And we sent him a notice of a Loudermill hearing, complete with concerns that we had about his performance. The hearing was held on December 10th. It was convened by me. Also present were Mr. Walker, Mr. Stark, and Mr. McMahon. After a lengthy discussion, and you got a feel for Mr. Walker's presentation style. It came down to His response could be summarized as follows. That Mr. Walker believed that there was too much work assigned to him, and some of that work should be assigned to someone else. Because there were too much work assigned to him, he was not getting everything done in the time allotted. He did what he could do, but he's not perfect. And he also mentioned that he always emptied the trash cans in the rooms, but to accommodate the lack of time, he would clean halves of the floor over 2 nights in some classrooms. The way he explained it is, I go into a classroom, I clean this half of the floor one night, come in and clean this half of the floor the next night. After the hearing, I contacted Ron Huseby, the retired director of building and grounds, and Chuck Stark, both at separate times. Both felt that there was more than adequate time to complete the assigned work. Mr. Stark provided me with a time breakdown indicating enough time for completion of work, plus my experience watching 3 other people hold the job indicated to me that there was enough time to complete the job. On December 14th, I sent Mr. Walker a letter of employment separation, including the findings of the Loudermill hearing. On December 15th, he agreed to dismissal based on Article 10 of the contract. Now, Article 10 has a lot of stuff in it, and it didn't say specifically in the agreements what he was agreeing, so I have to make some assumptions. Some of the things that are in Article 10 is all tools are furnished by the employer. The employees have to keep a provision of inventory of the tools. License fees will be paid by the district, and so on. So the only thing that seemed to apply is the portion that talks about progressive discipline. And it says any employee covered by this contract may be disciplined for just cause by the Board of Education and goes through a set of steps. And discipline may include oral warning, written warning, suspension without pay, suspension with pay, and discharge. These steps are not in order. There are things at the employer's disposal. So at that point, assuming that he was reading that section, I denied the grievance. Mr. Walker went on to step 2 of the grievance, which was to agree to Dr. Heller. The grievance was denied by Dr. Heller, citing the information in the letter of separation and the Loudermill meeting notes. So as I've described to you, Mr. Walker, who still was a probationary employee, and those of you not working in the public sector, which I know none of you do, a probationary employee is like an at-will employee. They have no necessarily employment rights, ongoing employment rights. But Mr. Walker's had multiple meetings at various levels, each noting performance expectations and his deficiencies in meeting them. Some of the meetings also discuss ways to organize his time to meet those expectations. It is my belief that Mr. Walker's had due process throughout this. He's had plenty of discussions with multiple levels of supervisors, all talking about what he needed to do his job. And he continued to not meet expectations. And then finally, the straw that was my biggest concern is when I'm seeing bathrooms, and that was a classroom bathroom, one that kids in that classroom use all the time, hadn't been cleaned for multiple days. Obviously, chemical had been put in the stool, and in the stool had been flushed because the chemical was gone. But the stool itself had not been cleaned. So, again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Any more members have any questions for clarification?
School board members, I'd like to respond to a few of those things that Mr. Sprung just said. For clarification.
I don't think that's the intent of this particular agenda topic this evening, Mr. McMahon.
Well, it's listed in the grievance. I think the school board deserves to hear what the grievance is about. And so the school board is clear on that. Mr. Sprung
So Mr. McMahon, are you just restating something that's already written? Is that what you're saying?
It's already here, but it wasn't characterized accurately.
Well, is it written or is it not written?
It's written, it's right in the grievance.
Okay. So how can it be misconstrued?
Mr. Sprung said there's a lot of stuff in section 10 of the contract. The grievance specifically states Article 10, general provision, section 5, and all other applicable articles. So that is a progressive discipline section. So there shouldn't have been any confusion around what section of the contract the union was grieving because it's spelled out right in the very first paragraph.
Okay. Thanks for your clarification.
And I don't want the school board to be misled that who Mr. Walker's supervisor was. Mr. Walker's statutory supervisor is Chuck Stark. The lead custodian is also a bargaining unit member and is not a statutory supervisor. That's a point of clarification.
Okay. So I want to repeat my question. Any questions from the board? Joe, just checking with you since you're online.
Nothing here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sprung. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Appreciate your time today. We'll take these documents and the conversation into consideration and get back to you in the specified amount of time.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Right. That brings us to the one of the highlights of the evening, fund adjournment.
I get a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Second. All in favor?
Okay.
I think so. Meeting's adjourned. Yeah. 7:56.